New recording. All right. And I am very happy and excited to welcome back Michael Gaio. Welcome back, Michael. Star of the first two block parties. And here we are on number 3. And welcome back, Jim, and welcome back, everyone.
Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah. So, Michael, please take it away. Please give an introduction to folks who may be seeing you for the first time and an introduction to your topic. And we are all ears. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Jamin. Yeah. Well, I just want to acknowledge that I just came in a few moments ago into this beautiful share by Stephanie, and I'm just wondering what was the context of the previous conversation we're in.
We have been in a conversation about how the planet is in the process of dying, and that can be turned around. But there's so few of us who A, recognize that, and B, recognize our own responsibility or our own potential in having an impact on this. And so we're just sharing our different perspectives of, where we're coming from individually, and now increasingly where we're coming from collectively. James, Stephanie, if you'd like to share any more on that, would love to hear from you.
I want to make one point. It's not about, we weren't talking about the planet dying. I want to correct that. It was about species on Earth. We can't kill the planet, so.
Yeah, exactly. This is not about the planet's demise. This is about all species, all life on the planet. That's why I referred to the coronavirus earlier, saying that though it's of major concern at the moment, and it's focusing everyone's attention on it as well now. Even the coronavirus, as I said and stressed, that this is about all species, all life, all organisms could possibly be wiped out, and so including the coronavirus. This is so the planet is not going to be doomed. The planet is not going to die. The planet recovers itself after millions of years, like it has in other previous cycles of natural extinction situations. The difference here is that this is not a natural extinction situation. This is a natural extinction situation that has been exacerbated by the human species. And we, as the human species, have an obligation to all other species, including ourselves and our own loved ones, to jump on board here so that we can collectively help, and I stress help, Jamin, Dr. Yetau, Dr. Guy McPherson, Professor Guy McPherson, everyone, ourselves. This is how we can help now. This is what you have to tune in for, how you can help. And you can help quite simply by tuning in and listening and just hearing a simple comment. As Jay, it doesn't matter what the comment is and what room you're in. You can just hear a simple comment that will resonate so much with you that you will, the light bulb comes on. Because, yeah, as I explained earlier, like the majority of people here in Ireland at the moment, yeah, we've been through an unusual change there back in the end of the, just coming into the just coming into the 21st century, I should say, the year 2000 coming on. The Celtic Tiger took off here with our economy, so to speak. And I don't want to go into economy talks or political talks or anything, but what I'm just saying briefly to the Irish people is that all of that was an orchestration anyway in the first place, just to keep this game going and everything else, and it's a Ponzi scheme. And they knew as soon as injecting all that money into the system, as we all know now, that it would all come crumbling down around us as a people. Not them, not the ones who orchestrated it, us as a people. The people on the ground who are constantly getting abused like this by the powers that be, and the top 1% who have the majority of the finance profits of all of it. It's time for us to, as a people on the ground, as I explained earlier, even in the poorest of societies, such as myself, I'm on social welfare here in Cork City. I said I've just finished 6 years of college. Now, I'm on social welfare, but I will emphasize one thing. I'm on social welfare now, just having just recently finished 6 years of college. I did 2 years because I never finished school as a young fella. I was bored and I had a bad attendance record. I just left when I wasn't interested. I explained that to Peter Miller. But I never finished my education, and I, as a young person, as you can see, my daughter is 30 this year, and I'm only 52. So I was a parent at 22, and thankfully to my parents, the goodness was instilled in me to be able to take on that responsibility as a lone parent when it was necessary, when Stephanie came along. And the point I'm making is that I kind of slightly got a little bit, I get emotional when I'm talking about my family and Stephanie, so I get slightly deterred, so bear with me now here. But if you could just guide me back there a second, Jim, to what I was saying previous to that. But
well, I think we were asking what was, I was just going to get a general sense for, since I'm coming in new to this conversation, I want to get a general sense for what the general
well,
context
a general sense is the general sense I'm trying to give out to the people of Ireland as well, and to my family to wake up and listen. And the general sense of the matter is that globally, the geopolitical system and the corporate system has had the wool pulled over our eyes for generations upon generations, and we are now facing a catastrophic catastrophe beyond all our imaginings if you get up with the right sciences of it all and the information behind it. We are facing a catastrophe beyond all that we have to sit up and pay attention to. A catastrophe that the powers that be and that they're aware of and doing nothing about it. They are doing something.
Okay.
They're playing
Okay.
their own games.
So I think I've got a good sense of
Yeah.
what we're talking about here. You know, this is the conversation we've been having for a long time.
Mm.
And you know that we're in a crisis. Got it.
Oh yeah.
So let me introduce myself. I know several people here who haven't met me. My name is Michael Gaio. I've been having this conversation for many decades. Just quickly, I have a background in technology, internet, but really at this kind of crossroads, I've been working with the internet in a way where it's been in support of projects around ecological and sociological sustainability. I've worked with projects early on in 2003 that were involved with the great mass extinction of species, making a film and a website when hardly anyone knew about it. I was right there working on that for years, really, really hard to sustain focus on, you know, entire species going extinct on the planet, not just animals, but species, you know. So I was somewhat of an activist, you know, with a technological bent. But I also have a very, very deep interest in psychology and psychospirituality and cosmology and philosophy. And I've got a graduate degree in philosophy, cosmology, and consciousness studies. I focused mostly for several years on ancient human history and the evolution of consciousness and archetypal psychology, really with the intent of trying to understand a lot about where humanity has come from in order to know where we are and where we might be going. Because we're certainly so attentive right now to what's going on, or some of us are. You know, everyone here in this group, we're here to show up to address this question we're talking about. You know, we're in a crisis and we're waking up, but why isn't everyone else waking up? And why aren't we organizing properly around this? And how are we going to organize properly around this? I've seen this. I've been in this for decades. I know many of us here have been in this for decades. I know people who've been in it their whole lives who are like 70 now. You know, like, I mean, trying to organize the population to address these global crises. And why is it taking so long? Why? Why does it seem like we're having such a hard time coordinating around this when it's so obvious what's going on? So these are big questions and something I've been going into for a long time. And I've for the last several years, I've been working on my own emerging initiative I call Mythic Systems. It's a brand and a business that's largely orientated around these questions, but from a unique perspective of really getting into I'm looking at trying to get into the deeper questions around the issue. Because my perspective is that we have all these major problems. We have ecological crisis, we have financial crisis, we have sociological crisis. We have more problems than we can even keep track of. And at the same time, if you look, we have all the solutions. Actually, we know how to solve all these problems, pretty much, most of them. We have all the resources. We have all the amazing technology. We certainly have lots of people. We have everything we need to address these issues. It's just a matter of organizing it and doing it. So why aren't these things meeting, and why haven't they been meeting for such a long time? That has me thinking, like, is there a deeper problem going on here? What's the deeper problem? And my answer to that is that underneath these layers of what's so apparent, the ecological, sociological, and economic crises, there's a deeper crisis that I refer to as a crisis in psychology. It's a crisis in meaning and a crisis in perspective. Some people might call it a spiritual crisis or a psycho-spiritual crisis, but there's all kinds of different words you can have for this. Basically, I call it's a psychological thing, meaning that there's something in our, I come from this from a Jungian psychological view that who we are as human beings is mostly a psychological state, and that there's different elements of that. There's our conscious mind. There's what we're aware of. We're very aware of this virus right now, and we can be aware of how we're responding to it too. That's another layer of the emotions we're having around it. And yet there's so much that we're not aware of. There's so much of what we are called the unconscious mind that's even more so than our conscious mind. And that's what we're not conscious of. How is that involved in this? Is that just a side note in this conversation? Or is there some more deeper significance to that? I think there's a lot more significance to it. Because we talked about this last week and the week before that. Basically I compare it to the life of an individual. So let's compare our collective problem with the problem of an individual as an analogy. So like, say there's a person, and in their life, they grew up and they had issues growing up. They had a hard childhood, and as they got older, they got the job that they kind of like it, they kind of don't, and they had they got through several relationships, and they're kind of depressed and having a hard time, and so they go to a therapist to get some psychological help to begin to bring some integrity to their lives, to be able to develop, to become a healthy individual. And could this be true on a collective sense, that as a collective body, we have a collective psyche, a collective consciousness, a collective unconsciousness, and what is not fully integrated? What elements of our collective history and our collective situation currently is potentially bringing up issues that are having us responding in these ways we're responding, the ways we're not responding to these crises? And is it even possible that some of this crisis that's happening is a result of deeper trauma, so to speak, or deeper psychological conflicts, things like this? So that's basically the perspective I'm coming from. And Mythic Systems has multiple projects that I'm developing to begin to potentially address this. And a lot of it has to do with story or narrative. That's at least that's an introductory avenue. And there's more after that. But so part of what I'm doing here, Jamin invited me to come in and do a regular talk. And so I'm just approaching that, just feeling it out. And it's an experiment for me as well to really see how we can integrate this into, to add to everything else. Because it's a everything else matters too. The economic systems and the solar panels, all of it matters. but I'm just adding, more of a holistic sense to this deeper level. So with that said, I think, is it James, you had mentioned, people being awake. How do we wake people up? We hear this a lot. We've been hearing it for years. Why aren't people waking up? I think I'm awake. Why isn't everyone else awake in the way I'm awake? If we can all get awake, then we can solve this nightmare we're in. And so that's perfect to what I want. One little seed I wanted to bring today is this is a story that I was reminded of earlier in the week, last week. It's called the story. It's an ancient story of humanity. It's one of the earlier stories we have. It's called the Hymn of the Pearl. Has anyone here heard of it before? The Hymn of the Pearl? Yeah, I my professor in graduate school, he had like a PhD in ancient history, and he pointed out to me, and it was just brought to my attention again last week, and I think it's appropriate here. So the Hymn of the Pearl, it's a story that comes from something called the Book of Thomas, and the Book of Thomas was one of the extractions from these ancient scrolls that were found. I think it's in like the 1950s. We discovered like these hidden vases, I think near Egypt or somewhere over there in the Middle East. Some boy was walking along with his goats one day, and the goat ran into a cave, and he went in to get the goat, and he found these old clay vessels, and inside were these ancient scrolls, something like, I think, more than 2,000 years old or something like this. And so they've the scholars researched this for years, and basically these scrolls were priceless because they're records of people talking about spiritual ideology at that time that's kind of related to what we think of as Christianity today, but it was different. It was what we called Gnostic. It was the Gnostic tradition, which is very much related to Christianity, but most people regard it as kind of like a more pure form of what Christianity was really trying to communicate. What if there was a person named Christ on the earth, Jesus, that he was really much more expansive and holistic in his communication than what the Bible portrayed and all this. So these texts really were disruptive a lot about what was being said. They were referring to Christ a lot, and all these, and the things that he was actually saying were really giving a lot of new context to the Bible and all these things. So they're a little bit disruptive and also expansive to what our ancient ancestors, not that long ago, just a few thousand years ago, were really talking about as far as their relationship to being human in this world, right? Because that's what we're asking now. Like, what is our relationship with ourselves being in this world today? And it's very, very different than it was then. But what could we possibly learn? Still, we're still human, and we have this long lineage of human. So again, getting back to that analogy of us being like a single body with a story in the past, what does this deeper, is there anything we can learn about this deeper lineage? And so the Gnostics, I really love Gnosticism. They fundamentally had this view that that we come here as human beings, from another place. And this would be congruent with most other religions and other spiritual perspectives, that we really manifest here, and there's a purpose behind it. There's a much deeper purpose to being here, and and they kind of mapped it out. They kind of had they had this very eloquent system around it, like really what it means to be here, and what we're to do here, and what it means outside of Earth. And so this hymn, this story of this Hymn of the Pearl, is really a good story that really kind of like crystallizes and really gets the essence of what they're talking about. And it really rings true for me. And so I'm just gonna read it a little bit, and we can go from there. Maybe just talk about it a bit, or expand upon it. Actually, it's like 8 pages long. I don't think I'm going to read the whole thing. I think I'll just summarize the story, actually. So the story is about this young boy who comes from what's called the Kingdom of Kingdoms. And his father was the King of Kings, and his mother was the Queen of the East. And they had this perfect kingdom. Everything is opulent and, really, really huge. The King of Kings and the Kingdom of Kingdoms. And this boy comes from it, and they give him an assignment. They say, our son, we have a mission for you. Go down south into the land of Egypt. And there is a pearl that is being guarded by a beast, something like a dragon or a serpent, right? Go down there and deal with this dragon, this beast, and get that pearl and bring it back here, bring it back home. And when you do, you're going to inherit all of our kingdom and be elevated to the highest status as our holy son, right? Okay, mom. Okay, dad. So he travels down to Egypt, and he gets down there to where he finds the beast, the dragon serpent beast, is sleeping around this pearl. Or actually, it's not sleeping; it's awake. And so he's got to try to figure out, like, how is he going to get around this beast and get to the pearl. So he's kind of camping out in this little town, and there's other people there too. There's other travelers coming from different places for different reasons. And as he's waiting for days or weeks, he can't help but interact with these other people. And then they tell him their stories, and they start talking to him, and they start giving him their food. And he starts kind of like acclimating to this kind of like diverse lifestyle of these travelers. And he becomes a little distracted, by their stories and their missions. They have different missions and stuff. And one night he falls asleep, and he just kind of goes into this slumber for days and weeks, and he's sleeping, and he's completely forgotten about his mission to get the pearl. And so his parents, back up in the Kingdom of Kingdoms, they can feel what's going on, and they write a big letter. And they find an eagle, and they put the letter on the eagle, and the eagle flies it down to Egypt and finds their son and wakes him up and gives him the letter, and he reads the letter, and they're like, oh, our great son, why hast thou sleep, and things like this, awaken and remember your mission. And they go into great detail. Again, you remember, you are here. We have assigned you this mission to retrieve the pearl, and we love you so much, and da. And he remembers again. He remembers and he breaks out of these distractions and these conditionings, and he goes to the beast, and he puts the beast to sleep. He puts the beast to sleep because now he knows how to sleep. So he puts the beast to sleep, and he grabs the pearl, and then he returns to his homeland, the Kingdom of Kingdoms, and his parents receive him so well. He has the pearl, and they bequeath him with their properties and elevate him to the highest status. And that is the story of the Hymn of the Pearl. It's a very simple story. It's probably told in many other ways, in many movies and many books, but this one is just so essential, just gets to the point. It's this idea that the King of Kings, it's what they would also refer to, others would say, is the Christos, not just necessarily Jesus Christ, but Christos was this archetype of the highest, of like a living intelligence of integrity in the universe. It's like, their holy figure. And so this tale really represents their general philosophy that we come from another place. We're assigned here to come to Earth, to do something, to retrieve something. And we will get distracted. We will. This place is designed for it. We live in a place of duality, and this Earth mission is a challenging one. And it's very easy to get distracted and to lose our way and to go to sleep, sometimes for, our whole lives, possibly, or more. And so, in the story, this letter represents a calling, so to speak. It represents that kind of like divine intervention that comes in our lives sometimes to snap us out of it. give us that moment is really, really understanding what's the most important thing to do. So,
Michael,
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, yeah.
oh, just quick question. Are you taking questions and comments during your presentation, or would you rather we hold off till the end?
I think we're right. I think we're right about there. I mean, that's pretty much it. I just wanted to. I felt intuitively like I wanted to just deliver this and then just talk about it. I have nothing more to say about it. I don't think. It's just I think that it's good to be aware that it's easy to fall asleep in this world, and that we're all falling asleep to some greater extent than others, and that, you know, there's many different kinds of wake up calls, and it's just a place for discussion now. Yeah, it's a place of questions and discussions.
Beautiful, beautiful, Michael. Thank you so much. I noticed, Stephanie, I think you had your hand raised, followed by Jim. So go ahead, Stephanie.
I just wanted to say, I suppose everything you mentioned is probably the reason I'm in this conversation. Obviously, I wouldn't know this place if my dad didn't say it, but there are things I am contemplating and thinking about my whole life as such. And I think, trying to remember all your points, but the very first point when you said maybe a collective consciousness, maybe you have to break it down to the individual. And I think that in there lies the answer, or at least part of the answer. It's kind of like somebody being told, getting a bad diagnosis, or even worse, terminal diagnosis, and how are they going to deal with that? So they're going to come in from all different angles, and everybody deals with it differently. So while we can promote stuff, like we can get popular people to tell people this is the stuff you should be listening to and all that, you can't tell people how to react to their mortality or such. So some people, it's out of ignorance, sometimes it's out of fear, and some people, like probably a lot of us, would embrace it and try and get acquisitive and try and learn more. But just to summarize that point, where your story about retrieving the pearl, which I suppose Amira said earlier about, like, we forgot our purpose, which is essentially that. And personally, not to go religious, but personally, again, the reason I'm in this conversation is because I'm constantly thinking about mortality and religion, or lack of, and that makes the biggest sense to me. Is that, like, look at the size of the universe, like, you know, it's endless. So, like, we're not the only living intelligent life out there, and that makes the most sense out of anything else. But if there was intelligent life that planted their seed here, for lack of a better term, and they'll be very disgraced at what we have done with our time here. I would say, we could have used our time a lot better and a lot wiser. But us, in our generations and generations hopefully to come, we were born into this, you know, and we lost our ways a long time ago. So it's kind of almost asking people to do something they've never known, as well as battle with how they're going to take the idea of death and the death of the planet. It's kind of like telling, like, sorry if I trigger anybody, but it's kind of like being told you have a terminal illness, but now everybody's been told they have a terminal illness. So it's not the situation you're in, it's how you react to that situation. And while a lot of us might be on the same page and we want everybody else to be on the same page, we can't exactly force people to think how we'd like them to think. So I think, like you were saying, why is it that not everybody is having this conversation? Why isn't it not that prominent? And that's probably part of it, not the reason, but definitely part of it, because it is our own personal views at the end of the day about our mortality, as well as our planet's mortality and the species on our planet. And that's my say. Thank you.
I love your say, and I fully agree. And that's another fundamental principle that I operate by. We talked about this last week a lot, is it begins with the individual, and we must just, we can do our best to make sure we are awake in the way that we feel most aligned in ourselves with our own lives and mission, and just do that as intensely and as brilliantly as we can. And that in itself can be a way of communicating to people, of seeing if they're awake or not. But yeah, otherwise it's really, I've seen it's really difficult to tell people to wake up. I think it works better to show them by concentrating on ourselves and focusing on our own health and integrity. It's another point I mentioned last week is, yeah, if we want a healthy collective, and I think one aspect of engendering collective intelligence is to focus on the health of the individual agents of that collective. If you have many, many, many healthy individuals, you will have a healthy collective. And then that's one thing that will help collective intelligence emerge.
Beautiful, beautiful. All righty. Next comment up is Jim, followed by James. Go ahead, Jim. Thanks for your patience.
Thanks. I had 2 points to make. I think I'll stick with my first point. I love the story about the pearl. I could go into that a little more. But what I loved earlier in what you said, Michael, is the fact that, you know, you're asking yourself this question, why? You know, I think so often that's the hardest question to ever ask ourselves or ask anyone. You know, why is the situation that we're in, why are, we have 15 people here, you know, and why are so many people not woke to this issue to where they want to participate in a possible solution, given that the impact is going to strike us all, like Stephanie said, you know, it's going to strike those of us who have, each of us individually, those of us who have children, those of us who have grandchildren, those of us who have nieces, nephews. Everyone on the planet is equally affected, in my opinion. And when we ask the question, why, and we have to say that if everyone on the planet is equally affected, you know, each of us probably don't have the means to have such a great impact other than our collective brainstorming. So we can collectively brainstorm, but how about the people who do have the means to make a difference? You know, are they less woke? Are they less woke than we are? I can't imagine Bill Gates, Melinda Gates, who have children, don't love their children enough to want to try to seek out an effective solution, or Warren Buffett, who has children and grandchildren and maybe even great grandchildren, and Jeff Bezos, and, you know, all the people around the world who have buku money. You know, earlier today, you weren't around for this, but there was someone kind of doing a GoFundMe for the Roland Institute at Harvard to try to gather some funds to help get the message out, or get funding or seed money to help, you know, start solar SRM. You know, so I think those are the kind of why questions that I don't quite understand. I think it goes beyond psychology, you know, because we're all in this together. You know, and I think we have to consider the fact that there is no solution, that we don't have the means to affect a positive outcome. And like Stephanie was saying, you know, I think our operating premise has to be, if there's not enough interest beyond what we can muster here, could it possibly be because we are in a hospice situation, and what we can do is offer emotional support? I think we have to consider that. And I'll just see what your thoughts are on that.
What my thoughts are? Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. I think I'm not sure what you meant by saying that the why is deeper than psychology, but
well, the why could be possibly that there are those people who understand the physics and the science and the math that know that it's better to go on being numb to the situation, or not woke to the problem, and maybe it's best to keep the masses that way than to have mass panic and chaos. You know, I think we have to consider
totally
that could be
absolutely, yeah,
a part of the why, you know.
Oh, it could be. I've thought that. I've gone deep, deep, deep down that rabbit hole. 2010. I was a major conspiracy theorist, and I went into all that. I went fully into 9/11 and fully, fully, fully into the deep, deep, dark areas of what the powers that be in this world might be thinking and doing and planning, and why they might be doing it. What are their motivations? And I did come to some conclusion that possibly, let's not be delusional here. There are very powerful people, very powerful groups in this world who are pulling levers. Absolutely, it's true. That's a whole other conversation. And they're smart. They have unlimited resources of income. They have huge think tanks. They have the most intelligent people in the world getting together and analyzing everything and running graphs and all this stuff. They know about a lot what's going on. They know human psychology very, very, very well. They know collective psychology and all that very, very well. They probably have a pretty realistic pulse on things. And yeah, what happens to a planet when you have 8 to 10 billion people on it? On a small planet like this, we have a very small planet. There's not a lot of resources. The population is burgeoning. Is it realistic that we can sustain that with coming up to 8 to 10 billion people? Is that realistic? Maybe they know this, and maybe they're just like going, well, what are we going to do? Maybe the population needs to dwindle down. Yeah, I've come across that thought. That might be true, and I could totally get practical with that and see that might be true, and that maybe that's why they're not responding the way we hope the governments to respond and all this. At the same time, what's Bill Gates thinking? He has children. What's his plan? Do all those people have their bunkers already set up and they're ready to ride this out? That could be true too. That could be their perspective, and I could see where that perspective would come from. I guess, yeah, that is part of it. That doesn't quite, in my view, that doesn't quite negate that we do have all the solutions to make. Let's just separate a few things out here. I think we have all the technology, we have all the systemic design and the resources to create a really amazing world here. Like, we could have like unlimited clean energy, food for everyone, and all this like that. We could do it. It would be probably better to have a little bit limited population, and we could engineer that to go down over time. So I mean, it's a dense conversation to talk about how we could do that. But the point is, we could, in the right, maybe half the population has to die off, or whether we engineer it in a more graceful, compassionate way that it dwindles down. But nonetheless, whatever they see, they also have a plan for it. That I don't think not everyone's going to die. The only situation where everyone's going to die is if a meteorite hits the planet or something like this. I think, anyways, speaking generally. But regardless of all that, what are we really here to do? What if we did save the planet like that? What's I guess the point I was getting to earlier with the Hymn of the Pearl is I feel like there's a deeper mission that we're not aligned with. We don't really know what we are, who we are, or the universe we're in. We're really distracted by ourselves, actually, profoundly distracted. The political, it's all about the White House and Trump right now. My God. So like we're profoundly not to say we have to like not look at that, but like there's so much more we could be looking at. So to answer your question, it's like all this is going on. Yes, we might be looking at a lot of death in the future. And that would be part of it too, and that's part of what I'm here to do is to help people deal with the emotions around it. And I think that could be part of it, meaning that, and we talked about this last week, I think, one narrative going forward is that perhaps we've designed this crisis from our unconscious because we've experienced so much crisis in the past that we've designed this crisis so that we feel the effects of what it's going to be like to die in order to make a fundamental change. Because that's often what happens for most people anyways. Individuals, you'll get the guy who's just, he's got a really bad habit. He's eating the really bad food and the really bad alcohol, and he goes to the doctor. Doctor's telling him, if you don't stop smoking, if you don't stop drinking, you're going to die within 5 years. And so he keeps doing it for 3 more years until all of a sudden he feels it in his body. He's like, oh my God, I am going to die, and then he changes, right? So I think that's going to be a reality too, is that we're in some ways we're engineering this on some level, so that we go right up against the challenge that's necessary, so we can feel this trauma crisis that's potentially in our past. And so being available to that, giving voice to that's a real thing happening, is certainly, in that case, a key part of it.
Beautiful. James had his hand up, followed by Melissa. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks very much for that. Yeah, that was a great talk there as well. Yeah, covered a couple of things there, just discussed there. I'm going to go like basically the why is the asking the question why, like, and looking searching for the answers why. That, of course, that's all very important and everything else. So, yeah, I understand that. And why aren't the masses, tuning in and everything else? Obviously, the masses aren't, I don't mean to the show, no, I mean tuning into the reality of the situation that's going on and everything else. Like, so obviously it all stems from somewhere, deep down and in our past, as, I love the story about the pearl there as well, as that, that's exactly where he was on about there, sorry, his name is sliced out of my head now because I don't have it up on my screen here. Guy, is it?
Who? Me?
Who was just speaking there? Yeah, where you were talking earlier about the scrolls that were found in the caves over in the Middle East there back in the 70s. And about the people that put them there, and like the people that existed, before even the time of the start of Christianity, as you said, and as you said, it stems from Christianity stems as well from those writings and beliefs and everything else. And you're right, yeah. And you're as you said, the scrolls were in the caves in the Qumran Mountains in the Valley of the Red Sea there, on the cliffs of the Qumran Mountain. But the people that wrote those scrolls, the Essenes, the Society of the Essenes at the time, who had their own, they separated and segregated themselves completely from society as a whole. And now these were people who would have been all born and brought up in the neighboring Jerusalem, and they were of the Judaism sect as well, prior to the start of the Christianity story in the Old Testament. So basically, a lot of their scrolls and everything else were as they used to have employed scribes. Many of them were scribes, and they were employed there. They were part of their work was to replicate these scrolls, the information that needed. The most treasured possessions that they had was their information, and the part of the stories from their past, as you said, and it answers where we're coming from in all these questions. And I get exactly where that there's going to be a lot of people going to be asking the question why, and like where is this all coming from? And of course, this is going to be a myriad of questions going through. And as Stephanie said as well about taking it as a hospice situation, which is the way I took it, and it was why I had the conversation with Peter Miller. Now, if I'm going over time, somebody remind me. But what Stephanie was saying there about taking it as a hospice situation, you can't kind of force, and as I said to Peter Miller, you can't throw this news, the whole lot of the news of this situation we're in on top of a person who has no idea, and the reason they have no idea and the why to that is, again, because of those, because of the society being beguiled and distracted, as you were saying, like we are distracted and everything else with the everyday going on in life and everything else, and those powers that be that are making sure that we do that. And as regards to why aren't the powers, why aren't the wealthy, the elite? Surely the powers that be know what's going on. Of course they do, and definitely that the elite as well know that what's going on, because these people are the people that finance the powers that be anyway in the first place. So obviously they're going to have them kept in the know. As regards to what are they doing about it, what they're doing about it is the same as the governments or the powers that be are doing about it, which is basically self-preservation as long as possible for themselves. And if you listen to Jem Bendel's, that's Jem Bendel's conversations. Jem Bendel wrote the Deep Adaptation Papers, and if you listen to his conversations, you see like that. In one of his conversations, he mentioned, because he's an advisor to a top advisor to the UN. He was working for the UN at the time, but he was prioritized to and arranged a meeting. It was arranged for him to meet with, I think he said, 5 of most wealthiest people on the planet, who wanted to have a meeting with him after reading his deep adaptation paper. And they wanted to have a meeting with him about what it is they could do about it. Of course, he was overwhelmed about this, as he said, and he went to them to thinking that maybe they're going to contribute to some, deep adaptation. He was horrified to find out that all they wanted to know what to do about it was how do they protect themselves in whatever is coming. Because as far as they were concerned, they knew about it and they referred to it as the event. So they know already, and they're doing whatever they can do about it, which is self-preservation. So the reason they're doing that and applying those tactics themselves is because they understand the science as well as Guy McPherson does, and so eloquently puts it when he explains it in his videos to people. They understand the severity of the situation, but like Guy McPherson, they're also then, because of that, they're also of the mind that there is nothing we can do about it. No, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore, and there are things we can do about it. And your conversation and everything you suggested is just a myriad, part of the myriad of things we can be doing about it. We need to have these conversations. We definitely need to have one of the main things I said to Peter Miller, because he's a clinical psychologist himself in his own life, but's given his time to these hospice conversations twice a week. And you can log on there with Peter and book a conversation at some time. There's a calendar available on the site. But the reason for that is because he, again, when he became aware of the severity of the situation, and when he started searching for more, like me and my curiosity, he was driven on to search for more information. And he came across Guy McPherson, and being a professional in his field of clinical psychology, he got onto Dr. McPherson, had a conversation. I'm sure you probably watched it. I know yourself, and he had 5 conversations, and over those 5 conversations, you could see the transformation in his, because of his awareness of the problem. He was acquisitive at first with his first conversation with Guy McPherson. Because if it was clarified for him properly then by Guy McPherson in the first conversation, he went away for a month or so, and he went into the hospice situation himself immediately because of the fear of it. Immediately, you're going to fear for yourself, your loved one, but you're immediately, you go out of the equation, yourself goes out of the equation, and it's your loved ones come into the equation. So he went through that process as well, just like I did all level last year, and personally still am at the moment going through the process of hospice. But it's a more profound hospice when it is a global hospice. And given that is seem to have been the only outlook, all as of up to date, basically, until the collaboration between Jamin and Dr. Yetau and everyone else and Guy McPherson, light has seemed to be thrown on the situation. And when light is thrown on the situation, when humanity is awoken and aroused and impassioned behind an effort, like a global effort, I don't want to mention political situations or wars, but it was a typical situation like in England during World War II. The whole society came together as a whole. Ireland does the same. it was a world war that pulled the whole people together in England. That people's wealth and everything else didn't come into it. They improvised a rationing situation where the people told people how to grow their own foods, but also they had to be taken. Rationing had to be taken serious, and that went for the wealthy as well as the poor. Everyone got equal. Now, obviously, there's a black market situation, but that's neither here nor there. The idea was that everyone was equal in the situation, the horrific situation they faced with the war that was unfolding on top of them, and they pulled together as a nation, and they did it, just like those scientists proved with this experiment with those young boys. The powers that be know the situation, the wealthy know the situation. The powers that be and the wealthy, the 1%, are the ones that were more or less in the situation where I'm not blaming it. It's not a blame game. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying it's probably they're in the more better, or we'll just say they're in the know a lot longer than we are. And this is an initial shock for the majority of people. And it's probably anyone who hears it is going to be an initial shock. Yes, just the only thing you can do is then when you get the initial shock, be aware that there's light now ahead, because the light needs to be brightened by the collective intelligence of the people on the ground. And with all the different facets that we're getting together and everything here now in these conversations, and the myriad of topics that will branch off into other conversations, that is the how. That is that the why is no longer time to ask why. We know why the imperative situation that's upon us at the moment with the warming. We know why that's happening because we know the science. Anyone that doesn't know the science, it's up to them to quickly get themselves up to scratch with it by looking at the links that could be provided. Once you're up to scratch with the seriousness of the situation, that's grand. The why question goes away. Then it's all right. What can we do about it? Here in Ireland, it took a war to get people up and motivated here in Ireland. Now, that was for a long time. The people of Ireland have been quiet and slumbering, and it's because of I'm not going into politics now again, but it's because of the political situation here and the wool that was being pulled over people's eyes. Anyway, that we are now only starting to be motivated again, and in situations like standing for right, and it took simple things like water for us to do that, and for the whole country to unite, because we here in Ireland have free tap water coming in our doors because we pay our taxes and our rates, as we say if you're a council, council tenant, you'd pay your rates. If you're private, you'll pay your taxes and everything else. And these are supposed to maintain the water system and everything else. But they wanted to bring in the meter system and start charging us on top of those rates and on top of those taxes and everything else. And no, that was just, it seems like an insignificant thing now.
James?
Life. Sorry.
Okay, no, I just wanted to make a brief comment. Love everything you're saying, but right now we only have Michael Gaio for about an hour.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
okay.
Good. Since you asked for feedback, I'll give you the feedback. When it's when we have people waiting, we just kind of try to keep it to under a couple of minutes. But then later, when we have open session, if you want to talk longer, that's totally fine. But anyway, right now I just want to rein it in a bit. But really great stuff, James. No complaints about what you're saying at all. Alrighty. Michael, back to you. Thanks for your patience.
So I wanted to I think I'll just read something else, and I'm still open to continuing the conversation with things, but I just found this this quote that kind of goes along with this theme. We're just exploring this idea. It's just exploring a deeper why, I think that if we it's like if you have a garden and the plants are dying, you got to dig into the dirt a little bit. Oh, look, we found some moles. it's the moles. We're sure of it. We're 100% it's the moles. Take care of the moles, take them out. Da, 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 da. Next year, the plants are still dying. Dig again. Oh, well, so it's like, I think there may not necessarily be one thing. There might be multiple things. And it's just more of it's a general way of orientating to reality, I do. It's just like of continuing to ask why and continuing to ask the deeper questions in order to not assuming we know exactly what's going on. Because I think when it comes to, I'm clear, of course, the dark actors in this world, the power holders, the centralized forces are for certain doing things and having an influence in this thing. And well, why? We can ask why that then? Why? How did that happen? Why are they that way? How and there's so many different ways we can approach it. So again, we're just exploring it. But here's I want to screen share so you all can read this fine quote. Where is the share? So related to the hymn of the pearl, related to the pearl. Can y'all see my screen?
Now we can, yes.
You see the quote on white?
Marie von Franz.
Right. So Marie von Franz, she was I think that was the daughter or friend of Carl Jung, and from her book, she says, "For wherever there is a pearl, there is a monster lying on it. Wherever there is a treasure, there is a snake wound around it. You cannot get near the self and the meaning of life without being on the razor's edge of falling into greed, into darkness, and into the shadowy aspect of the personality. One does not even know if it not necessary sometimes to fall into it, because otherwise it cannot be assimilated." Marie von Franz. I would say maybe better than the term assimilated is integrated. This gets into basic psychology that there are shadow elements. That in each individual has something called a shadow. Each individual has an ego. It's all about integration of these things. And on a collective scale, we could say that these darker forces in the world, these power holders, so to speak, in some sense are representing that aspect, the shadow aspect of the collective psyche. And so it's a tricky thing. Like how do we really approach this in a way where what are we really all learning on some deeper sense around this, that we've created the situation where the dragon's in the room, the pearl is the earth, the pearl is the life we feel like we could all have. The pearl is the earth, and yet there's a dragon wrapped around it. And how do we wake up and get the dragon to sleep so we can grab the pearl?
Beautiful.
So.
Wow. Alrighty, Melissa has been waiting for a while, followed by Miles. Go ahead, Melissa. Thank you.
Always love hearing you speak, Michael. I want to ride off the back of what you're saying. So thank you for re-saying that.
Yeah.
Have we created this? And I always loved this phrase that one of my architectural tutors used to say, we are the myth. And the myth is not something separate from us. I would like to say we are part of the story of the universe. So the universe is dreaming itself, or it's thinking itself into existence, of which we are part of. And I wanted to refer to the ancient Hopi prophecy. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but this prophecy has been passed down by the Hopi elders for generations and is part of their tradition. And has their ancient petroglyphs, which depict very clearly what is to come, which is happening now. And in the prophecy, it states that when the blue star Kachina makes its appearance in the heavens, and that's known to us as Sirius, the star Sirius, world will emerge. And so we are leaving the fourth world and coming into the fifth world. And really, the story, what it's representing is this quest that we are on to find answers to the greater truth of who we are and why we are here, which is what I'm hearing in part what you're saying with your story as well, Michael. And that something in our souls is telling us that change is happening on this global consciousness level, that we are changing. They're very clear in their prophecy that we've come to a time where the paths have split in two. And one road they call the red road, which is the path with the heart on it, and that people will make very definite decisions about which path they will walk, whether they'll follow the red road or the path of materialism, which will lead to destruction. And it's really worth looking into. If anyone's interested, you can just Google it, Hopi Prophecy. They've written in detail a whole guide of how to survive the transition and the change. So I just wanted to mention that one.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa. I love that too. That's perfect. It's a good one. Do you have something else to say, Melissa?
There's just something about color. So they talk about blue, the color blue, the blue kachina. And Sirius is also Isis, which kind of is from a really ancient culture that's behind us, ancient Egypt. And it represents a rebirth of consciousness, which is really, again, I'm hearing you talk about that, Michael. It's like we're rebirthing consciousness. So we've fallen asleep, which is a classical situation that happens in a lot of fairy tales. Rip Van Winkle's another one, fell asleep for 1,000 years or whatever. And it's like going into that shadow. Falling asleep is an essential part of us waking up. It's like this gestation period. So yes, we've fallen asleep and now we're waking up. And there's stuff happening outside of us that's influencing our insides that we are not in control of. So I believe everyone is feeling it. They might not be able to articulate it the same way we can. And then just going back to the color blue. So blue is a really high frequency that's related to consciousness and the spiraling through patterns or sacred geometry. So I think that's really interesting. We're coming into this higher level of consciousness in this sort of blue zone, you know, of awakening into sacred geometry and coming, awakening to this understanding of relationship, relating to one another, relating to self, relating to the world around us, relating to other species. And I love that. I find that so beautiful. And I just hope everyone can wake up to experience it consciously.
I do too. Yeah, thank you. I love what you're sharing. I just want to add two things to add to that perspective. Also, one is, we talked last week about some of these ways we can look at what's happening in the world, these kind of like meta narratives, and that we hope that everyone can wake up. But also, it might be that not everyone has to wake up. It might be that just a certain amount of us have to wake up. Just like we discussed last week with the process of the butterfly, or of a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. They go through chrysalis, they die. The caterpillar does not exist anymore. It goes into a chrysalis, it melts and falls apart. It's a very gooey, not comfortable process. And then there's these imaginal cells, not all the cells, just a few cells that come up that have the new plan. They have the blueprint. They have the DNA that's going to describe what the new organism is designed. And those imaginal cells then orchestrate and organize that goo to become this new being that then grows wings and flies away. Utterly different than the caterpillar. There is a death and a rebirth. And, so both that death and rebirth, and maybe not everyone needs to wake up. Also, with the connectivity, last time you shared this too, and I thought about something afterwards I wanted to share with that, of a perspective that comes from the Vedic, right? They talk about Indra's net. This idea of Indra's net is deep in the Vedic philosophy. they say that the way that the universe is constructed is something like, they describe like many, many, many gems or pearls in this kind of like complex, vast network, where each node, each individual gem or pearl is polished so perfectly that they reflect every other pearl in them, right? And so I think this relates well with what you're saying. We're all saying is that by focusing on the health of the individual and becoming very integrated and polishing ourselves, we're going to naturally connect. It's only when we get unhealthy, we tend to get distracted and we look for connections to other things, or we block off connections. But when we're fully integrated and healthy, it's just a natural response to feel connection to everything like this. Who's next? What else we got, Jamie?
Beautiful. Thank you, Michael. Miles has been waiting. And is there anyone else who's waiting? Please signal if you are. And Stephanie. Okay, great. Miles followed by Stephanie. Go ahead, Miles.
Hi, Michael. Prior to you coming on, I headed downtown to City Hall, and on the way there, I came across this plaque and a photo, and I previously have read the words of Chief Crowfoot. And, you know, we're talking about what is it, why aren't people waking up, and what do we have to do to get them to wake up? One of the things that happened when I saw that plaque is what's called a synchronicity for me, because it was like, oh, boom, mic drop. I did not even realize this plaque was there, and it just fits so powerfully with what I'm working towards. And their words very much like Chief Seattle, which the words Melissa has read in the past, and I'm not going to read his whole speech, but Chief Seattle said in 1854, "How can you buy or sell the sky, the warmth of the land?" ? The idea is strange to us. If you do not own the freshness of the air and the sparkle of the water, how can you buy them? And it goes on from there. So the synchronicities, and we need to get, as you said, people understanding these concepts. I'm quite new to it. It was only maybe a couple of years now that I stumbled across this man named Carl Jung. Initially, it was because Jordan Peterson was talking about Jung, and then I went down into another YouTube channel that again took me into Jung, and now with Skip Conover. So I'll wrap up and you can talk about synchronicity. But what I want to talk to my friends over in Ireland about, you know, because not too many people, as we've been saying, want to, like, where is everybody? It's just us here, this small little group, right? So we have to stick together and take everybody along with us as much as we can for the moral support, you know, the inspiration. And the reason why I'm saying, you know, you're Ireland, you're connected to this with me. I'm going to read from this book, which is titled "The True Spirit and Original Intent of Treaty 7. So that's the treaty that the Crown, the Queen, has with the local indigenous people. And it's a treaty with the Blackfeet, and it's treaty number 7. And it says here, I won't take too long, but the articles of a treaty made and concluded this 22nd day of September in the year of our Lord 1877 between Her Most Gracious Majesty the Queen of Great Britain and Ireland. So you see, you Irish, you still, you somehow still are connected to this treaty. Okay, so there's still a lot of work to do, is what I'm getting at. So between Her Most Gracious Majesty the Queen of Great Britain and Ireland, by her commissioners, the Honorable David Blair, Lieutenant Governor and Indian Superintendent of the Northwest Territories, and Colonel McLeod, Commissioner of the Northwest Mounted Police, of the one parts and the Blackfeet, Blood, Pagan, Sarsi, Stony, and other Indians and inhabitants of the territory north of the United States boundary line, east of the central range of the Rocky Mountains, and south of the treaties number 6 and 4 by their head chiefs and minor chiefs or counselors. So anyway, this is where I said, it's not that I don't like my friends at Climate Healers or radish.org, but there's a context that I'm trying to move this forward in, right? And I'm trying to be very respectful and honoring of this treaty arrangement. So where is this all going to go? Well, again, it's pretty complex in such that it includes constitutional law here in Canada, which, you're probably like, you wouldn't want to hear all of it, right? So I have to do my thing in my context, but I can take you along. Some of it, however, will have to be kept privileged because, as I said, the First Nations people have been ripped off for 500 years. And their creation stories are very powerful and very secret. Well, not secret, but they're careful about telling them. Anyway, synchronicity, very powerful. You might want to share about that.
Yeah, we talked about that last week too. We had a synchronicity last week talking about synchronicity. Because I think you had Miles, you had brought up Carl Jung and this idea of doing possibly a breakout group just to talk about that. And that's rich. I love it. It very much overlaps with what I'm talking about here. And I'm a big fan of Jung.
And I'll just say, you see, the synchronicity that I just described would not have happened if it wasn't for everything else that's going on right now in this channel and what has happened in the past, right? See what I'm saying? Even though none of you are living where I am, you are nevertheless somehow energetically affecting what I'm doing, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think synchronicity is an interesting thing. Again, getting back to this context, there's so much, we're all feeling so much in the world right now, and mounting fear, and there's so much fragmentation, and I think it's a delicate thing to do to have both these conversations at the same time, to be able to include all the systemic, all the politics, every level of this is important. At the same time, also weaving in some hope, some perspective that maybe maybe we're going to all die, or maybe it's a rebirth. Maybe we're going to die and then rebirth, and giving it that perspective too. And it's a delicate thing to be able to do both at the same time, because we don't want to be like doing any spiritual bypassing or in denial of what's really happening in the world. But at the same time, we don't want to lose sight of what synchronicity. It's if we really think about when that's happening, it's really pointing to something. It's pointing to some kind of like numinous intelligence that's already here in our reality. There's more going on here than what we're fully aware of, and that could be used as a resource too. Is that not involved with what's going on here? So it's good. Yeah, I agree, Miles. I think let's keep the conversation going.
Just add, very quickly. So my friend Skip Conover, he did an I Ching reading for me. I never have had an I Ching reading done for me, and I was like, oh my God, that's like, really powerful. Like it, and I'm not a mystic person by nature. My formal education is engineering, so this kind of woo-woo stuff is not of my typical past. And so, but nevertheless, this I Ching even has an energy to it. So yeah, there's some sort of massive amount of energy coming from many different directions and sources.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
Who's next?
Beautiful. If I've got it right, Stephanie, followed by James, followed by Jim. Go ahead, Stephanie.
I hope I keep my point on track. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can. Mhm.
There were so many good things said, and hopefully I stay on track. But to kind of backtrack a little, I really liked the quote you shared earlier. Kind of reminds me of Plato and things I would read. And for fear of repeating myself, as I said, the reason I'm here in this conversation is because I'm interested in I suppose, the hospice and the spirituality side of things. And I've always been reading my whole life, seeking and looking for an answer to what's after, if anything at all, and not really for my demise, but more so my family and everything. And the ironic thing is I'm not going to find out until I actually die, but I don't think I'm ever going to stop seeking, because one thing that gives me comfort is the fact that I can actually contemplate this. Why am I actually able to contemplate this as a human? Not only are we aware of it, we think about it and wonder why, and we ask these questions. So I have a comfort in that, because that must mean there's a reason we contemplate it. There's something drawing us, telling us there is an answer. And I do know that if there is an answer to that, then it's within us, not in a book or a building or anywhere else. But maybe you could integrate that into this kind of conversation as well, and take a bit of comfort that we're all aware, and there's a reason for that. And even though it might be a minority for now, maybe like you said earlier, show rather than tell. So like the Buddhists believe, like, if you want world peace, start in your own neighborhood. So you behave how you want to behave, and that does brush off on other people, and your community will brush off on the next community, and so on and so forth. So again, you can't control anything, and that's the one thing we do have to let go, is that we can't, like, we can tell somebody bad news, but how they take it, we can't control. So it is more showing, having these conversations, just owning it and doing what we do, but letting go of the fact that unfortunately we can't get everybody on board, but still not giving up hope, like not to be ignorant to the whole idea behind everything. But yeah, I suppose that's just on my point, that my final point is that take comfort in the fact that we are aware. So that must mean there is a reason, whether it's Mother Nature, religion, whatever it may be, there must be a reason. And I've all faith that things are meant to work out how they're meant to be. That's my point.
Wonderful, Stephanie. Yeah.
Beautiful, Stephanie. All right. We got James, followed by Jim. Take it away, James, but not for too long, please.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry about that earlier. I get carried away. Yeah, just a number of points. Stephanie, lovely. You put that very well. Yes, the stories. There is a reason why something in us is telling us that, you know, we need to act now, and she's right about that. And just as the talk is going about the stories are very vital to us now, like that we listen to them now, like the ancient stories, because they are the reason why some of us are feeling inside differently, and becoming aware of the situation. And that is where the awareness comes from. It stems from way back to those stories. And you know, the Hopi were mentioned, and yes, they have their story, and I'm very aware of the Hopi and their situation, their stories as well. And getting back to the scrolls that were found by the Essene Society, they had their stories. Their scrolls their scrolls that they left derived obviously from their story. And the Navajo have their story, and Judaism arrived from that story. I'm getting quickly to it. So yeah, it's vital to listen to them now, like, but they still go on. And we're living it now, and we're now coming into the new age that they were telling us about in all these stories. So yeah, it's vital we do listen to these stories, obviously, and it is part of the reason why our awareness is starting to wake up now. So, and this is probably, you know, I believe so, and I wholeheartedly that this forum is the forum for that awareness to wake up. So, thank you. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, James. Michael, any comments, or should we go to Jim?
Jim.
All righty. Thanks for your patience, Jim.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate this opportunity to share spiritual journey. Growing up, I had a strong sense of spirituality. At age 29, I was in a group, a pre-seminary group in the Catholic Church. And I met my ex-wife at this point in time and realized that my calling wasn't for celibacy. But for the next 29 years, I would say I, had a daily prayer life, and I felt spirituality was present. Then 18 months ago, I got whacked with the climate crisis. And at that point in time, I had a spiritual awakening of sorts, in that I could not any longer imagine that there could be a loving God who would do such a horrible thing to his children. For the most part, I don't believe there is blame to be placed in any of this. I think humanity really got ahead of their skis in seeking comfort, and we started burning fossil fuels, not really knowing the consequence. And then I believe at the time that the science caught up, it was too late. So I don't feel like this is human greed. I don't feel like this is any fault of anyone. I had a crisis in my spirituality. Around that time, I started understanding about the God of the gaps, and what science couldn't explain. They always said, well, that's God, or it's pseudoscience. It's something that is beyond the realm of human understanding. And the more that science discovered, the fewer things that could be attributed to God. And at that time, I started opening up my mind to the teachings of different atheists. I was willing to realize that all that I had come to believe was the result of all the things that I have read and all the things that I had been taught. During my seminary work, I did take a course in the Jungian approach to pastoral ministry. So I read several books on Carl Jung, and came to appreciate Carl Jung. But again, not to make too long of a dissertation on this, I just wanted to have everyone realize that, I'm at a point in my life where if you haven't presented yourself to me, or I have not met you, then I don't see the evidence. I want to believe that if we can approach the climate problem, it has to be evidence-based practice. We can't keep living in this area of the unknown that has a tremendous lack of evidence to support it. We believe it, but we believe a lot of things that isn't supported by evidence. So I just wanted to put that out there, that's one of the things that when you go down this rabbit hole, it can be one of the things that you conclude. I'm not trying to be a downer. I'm just trying to put it out there honestly, as far as where I've been walking in my spiritual journey. So thanks for your ears and your attention.
That's
Yep.
great, Jim. Thanks. Hey, can I share something, Jamin? Is there someone else in line, or I just want to respond to that?
No, at the
You just-
if I'm not mistaken, no one else is in the queue at the moment. Please, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but carry on, Michael. Thank you.
Well, I was just, Carl Jung came up again. I was just reminded of something. I just want to take an opportunity just to really describe more about like why he keeps coming up, and I think he's significant. He's not really that acknowledged in the world today. We've got psychology in the world today. We have psychiatry and psychology, and it's definitely a big force. But most universities that teach psychology will not teach Carl Jung, or will not even acknowledge Carl Jung. And it's so ironic because Carl Jung was a true pioneer, and he basically broke open, into areas of considering psychology and psyche that go well beyond, what Freud, his teacher, was. And that there's really a lot of he approached it in something like a scientific way, because the thing is, when you're dealing with psychology, it's a little bit of a quasi science. It's hard to get scientific with it. What we've done with modern psychology mostly is gotten extremely scientific with it, to the point of using medication to treat the psychological disruption or mental health, that it's not accounting for the fact that it's not a purely it's not a purely scientific thing. But nonetheless, Carl Jung, dedicated his life to, really exploring the frontier of the human psyche, the psyche and the collective unconscious, in a way that no one had even conceived of. And, part of that was, spending decades consistently going and, going to resources of looking at things like ancient alchemy and texts from cultures of spanning, centuries or millennia, to look for consistencies of symbols and patterns of human expression that was pointing to what, he would call archetypes of the psyche. There's a consistency. There's almost like a language and consistency that you could say is somewhat quasi-scientific. You could say that these things, there's some evidence here that there are patterns of psychic activity that are operating beneath us, that have been operating well beyond what we've even recorded in our history. And it's still a vast mystery to us what this even is, what this even means to be human in this world in this way. And, it seems significant to what's going on, and it seems like we can utilize that, because we're missing that. We again, kind of getting back to the beginning of this talk, what I'm mostly interested is exploring story, exploring psychological perspectives, exploring spiritual perspectives, in order to provide and co-create ways that we can orient in the world today, because we're in such a chaotic state. And maybe we need to be in this chaotic state, but the response to that is like, how can we orient and navigate this in a way? And things like story, myth, religion did this in the past. These were constructs that allowed individuals and collectives to kind of like orient to a reality and a life that's not always in control and not always perfectly in order. And, I personally don't believe we need to go back to anything we've had before. I don't think we can refer to myth, we can refer to the structures of story, we can refer to modes of spirituality and religion before. I personally don't feel like we need to recreate that again going forward. We need something else. We need something else like it. We need some kind of new way of orientating together and navigating together. But I think it can help in the meanwhile, as we construct this new thing together, it can also help to revisit the way we've been orientating in the past, and still use those tools now to orient as we're creating a new orientation, so to speak. But yeah, Jung is a really great resource. He's just got so much data on what's really like, there's never been anyone else in human history who's kind of really navigated those mysteries in the way he has.
Beautiful. I see James has his hand up. Stephanie, did you raise your hand? Okay, sorry. Alrighty. And I had a quick comment, which is I'm just so fascinated and so determined that we come up with that new story. We, all of humanity. And what better forum than here? Here we have the storytellers of the world, the Irish, all right, joining us. And with that, James, what's the new story? See, James is on mute. His story is so powerful, he has to mute it. Part of the myth.
Yeah, sorry. Still getting used to the technology. I won't keep you long. I'm just saying, like I did warn you last week that you'll probably regret my joining the conversation last week, because I said by next week you probably won't be able to shut me up. But
okay, perish the thought. First of all, love everything you're saying. It's just, you know, sometimes we're doing quick back and forth. But dude, you're great. Go.
Perfect. I understand that. So just a couple of quick things there. First of all, anyway,
About 24 hours here, so.
Thank you, Mike.
Well, firstly, anyway, going back to Jim there, I want to thank Jim for sharing that anyway, and I want to basically share as well in my understanding what he was saying there is that because I am also in the midst of a personal spiritual crisis myself anyway, with my faith and everything else, and obviously because it's part of the hospice procedure, not procedure, but it's a kind of a part of the hospice emotions that you go through, you know, the fear and the you know, the worry and all the different stages, and one of those is my now questioning my faith and my belief in everything. But in saying that, so I agree with Jim and what he's saying there, and that's why I said I wanted to thank him for sharing that, and for I'd like to thank Michael there as well for just sharing what he just shared there, and just getting back to what he just said there about the you know, the story and about the clues that who he was talking about was writing about and were left for us by ancient cultures. There are the clues are there, and we've been unearthing them for generations and centuries really. We were just unable to make a lot of sense of them, and I get where you're coming from. So I like that part of the conversation. Need someone to make sense of the stories, to tell us what are they telling us in these stories? Why did they find it so significant in their little humble societies, to leave massive reminders for us to search for the story. And so, like, I think one of the best people I think that I've come across, or best for me anyway, personally, the best person that I've come across that can explain those origin stories for us, which, to be honest with you, I'd advise you to look him up if you're interested. It even explained for me where my faith came from, where my Christianity, where Christianity for me came from, my spirituality came from, I should say, or my religious beliefs, I should say. And it explained to me where the others all over the world, the other different societies have their own belief systems and everything else, but they do all originate from these stories. And Zachariah Sitchin is the guy's name, and he's just sadly he just passed away recently, but his whole life's work is devoted to this subject, and he was the person who brought the Sumerian civilization to the world's attention, and to the vast libraries of information that they left behind on clay tablets, only for you see, they were written in their language, the first language, because the Sumerians, as some of you probably are aware of them, the ancient Sumerians of Mesopotamia, which is now modern day Iraq, they left those inscriptions in their clay tablets, but their language was lost to us until Zachariah Sitchin, who studied this thing, basically found the connection by studying the tablets that they have in the British museums and everything else. He found the connection that could cipher the language through the ancient Egyptian language, because he found that after the Sumerian civilization began and formed, and over thousands of years actually, it was thousands of years later that the Egyptian society came about, and their society traded, and in order to trade, they had to have common language for weights, measures, everything else. So they shared their common language and their form of of writing. So the ancient Egyptians shared their language through their hieroglyphics, and vice versa with the Sumerians shared their cuneiform language. And so he found to decipher the cuneiform language, and therefore they were now studying these vast array of libraries, literally libraries of clay tablets and information. And this is the oldest civilization that we can all go back to, and they are connected. Their story tells us that they are connected to the ones who came down from above and who transformed humanity by putting their mark on them, and that gave them their knowledge. And it's fascinating. I'm just saying, sorry, Michael, I'll go on again. Look up Zecharia Sitchin and look up the, I suppose, to cut to the chase, to save you any time looking through him, look up Zecharia Sitchin and the story of the Anunnaki.
Right. Yeah,
Hey,
I'm
Jamie,
Yeah, thank you.
Jamie, can I jump in for a minute, or somebody got their hand up?
We've got Miles in the queue, and we're also getting close to the end of our time right now.
Okay, it's fine.
But
no big deal.
No, but I'll let us say, Dharmendra, is if you can make it quick, that'd be great. And go ahead.
It's okay, because it may take 2 minutes, and if we're getting close to the end, let it just go on as it is. I can come out with it later at some point. It's fine.
Well, I've got just a quick statement to make, and maybe you can then piggyback right on. It might relate to what you have to say, Dharmendra. But I understand, Michael, you studied integral theory. The college or the university you attended is one of the few that studies Jung. And I was just wondering if Ken Wilber was anyone you worked with or studied under. And I think this is a quote of Ken Wilber, that we are to acknowledge the dignities and the disasters. Acknowledge the dignities and the disasters. So somehow we have to try to, even though we're, some of us really do feel we're in hospice, we sort of have to just embrace the hospice as one of the disasters. And anyway, enough from me. But Dharmendra can make
just real quick. Yeah, thanks for that quote. Just real quick. I've studied a lot of integral theory and such. They didn't touch upon Ken Wilber at that school, interestingly, but there's quite some contention around, the word integral. It's the California Institute of Integral Studies is where I went to graduate school. And we never talked about Ken Wilber, interestingly. But before I'd read some Ken Wilber before that, and I worked with some projects as a technology professional and multimedia designer. I worked with some projects that are involved with Ken Wilber in bringing a lot of his philosophy into graphics and interactive graphics and stuff like this. So I'm vaguely familiar with it. I think, I think he's mostly great. I'm not a huge fan of Ken Wilber, but I think he's headed in the right direction. Like, how do we integrate what he's saying with everything else too? But I'll just comment real quick too on what you're saying now, and also James, what you just said. I thought of something that weaves between what you're both saying around integrity, and James, just hearing you speak, James. And by the way, I love the mural behind you of the vast cosmos there. Kind of looks like you're God speaking from the infinity to us. But I was just for some reason I was reminded of something that I think, there's so many stories that we can go back to, and they're all good. And I think, though I think I'm just saying this, that I'm reminded because I'm remembering myself too. I think some of the most important stories that we can be both referring to and co-creating together are stories that really bring us back into integrity somehow, you know, and particularly with ourselves. I think like it's like, and this is part of one of the projects I'm working on with Mythic Systems is something called the Mythic Path, and it's like an education course that I'm preparing to roll out that would, you know, have a similar conversation we're having today, you know, talking about story in general, kind of like in this idea of orientating to meaning in the world, orientating to how we move in this chaotic world through things like story. And then where do we go? Then we begin with our own stories, actually. You know, like I've heard a few stories here today, Jim and James, you especially, you know, speaking about how, you know, at least what I heard, you know, that there's, and we all go through it at times, we have some of a crisis going on in our own perspective, our own, you know, belief systems, or, you know, that's a personal crisis that we can certainly draw from other resources, or we can draw from each other for support and assistance with, but ultimately it is our own crisis. And I think maybe that's part of the new story, is that unlike, you know, going to religion in the past, that religion and those kinds of structures held a certain purpose in our earliest history. And, you know, is it maybe now that we're, especially in the context of collective intelligence, because I think of collective intelligence as an extremely democratic thing. It's like democracy squared. That's what collective intelligence is. It's really, it's not just voting, it's like doing all dimensions of activity by a collective. And so, you know, if we're moving into, if we're going to move into a paradigm of solving this situation and becoming an extraordinary, the next level of what we are as a species, that's collective intelligence, it begins with the individual. It begins with our own individuals, or can we consider that it's our own little religion? Like, what is our own perspective on the world, and cultivating that and becoming fully, and it can borrow from whatever, but then be fully integrating that in ourselves, so that we feel whole in the world. And I think one aspect I approach to that is beginning with literally our own stories. You know, where did we begin in our life, and what were all the turning points, and our own little personal history. Where were our crises? How did we overcome them? Are we still in a crisis? How might we overcome this? That's a place to begin. And then sharing those stories too is then a way of connecting, making empathic bridges between us, and then learning from that space. So that's my sense, is that is kind of the new stories, beginning there, beginning with our personal stories and seeing how they match up, a lot of it.
Wow. Absolutely beautiful. What an amazing session. Michael, you are 3 for 3 on leading amazing sessions here. And we would be deeply honored if you would continue coming back, leading, and from time to time participating, if you just want to hang out and take some of the pressure off. But
yeah, I would love to. Excuse me, I've been super busy lately, so I don't know if I can hang around the next thing, but of course I would love to contribute to some of the other talks going on here at some point.
Beautiful. Absolutely. Well, you know, we're going till 6 a.m. Saturday morning, so come back whenever you feel like it and hang out as long as you like. We've got a really great segment coming up. I propose we take maybe a 5-minute break. Does that work for people, or do people need more than that? If you need more, let me know. Let's see. All right, so let's, I see 10, I see a call for 10. Jorge, is that okay with you if we start? Okay, let's start in 10 minutes, promptly at 12 after. And while we're on break, I'll keep it recording. Dharmendra, would you like to share what you wanted to share while we're on break? Some people will be here, others won't. Is that fair? Just to get the ball rolling anyway? I'll be listening in for myself. Okay, so we'll, 4:12, start with Jorge.
I mean, sure, I can share what I was going to share, but I'd rather do it when we're not in a break, because that seems kind of like I'm talking through the air.
Oh, okay. Well, no, that was just a thought. But
that's silly.
we could also take some time after the break and
Yeah, whenever it comes up, I'm not going to force anything in there. If it comes up that I can share some stuff in relation to what we were talking about, I will. But right now, it seems like there's a break happening. So
okay.
I'm going with that.
Very good. We'll break. We have to see all at 4 o'clock.